A big thank you to all of my patrons for all the support. I do have a Patreon, so if you like what I do, you can help support me by going on Patreon. For only $1 a month, you'll get early access to all of my videos, and during that early access period, they're completely ad-free, so you can watch all of my videos without the annoying ads. And if you want to support me in other ways, you can subscribe to the channel. It'll also give you the added benefit of being notified when a new video pops up, so you'll always be up to date with the latest videos. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I am your innkeeper, and today we'll be talking about Charm Person. Charm Person is a first level enchantment spell, and it's castable by bards, druids, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. It is one action to cast. It has a 30-foot range, verbal and somatic components, and a 1 hour duration. When you cast a spell, the target makes a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, they're charmed by you and regard you as a friendly acquaintance during the duration of the spell. If they succeed, nothing happens, but because of the verbal and somatic components, they're most likely going to know that you're up to something. So they won't necessarily know what spell you're casting on them, but they'll know you're up to something nefarious. And anyone watching you interacting with this person will also know that you're doing some kind of magical spell. Now, if they fail the spell, once the spell ends, they do know that they were charmed by you regardless. So this is something that's very important because it could potentially cause them to become hostile towards you, depending on what how they felt about you before you cast Charm Person on them. Now, think about in your personal life, any friendly acquaintances that you have. The most common is probably going to be your coworkers. So think about your coworkers. You don't necessarily call them your friends. You might, but not necessarily. And you're not neutral to them. You're friendly with them, right? So they are what I would consider a friendly acquaintance. So think about your coworkers. Now think about whether you would be willing to risk your life, your job, your marriage, or your friendships just to appease one of those people, as your relationship currently stands with them right now. I'm pretty sure that I know the answer to that question. So, with that being said, don't expect Charm Person to be cast on a guard, let's say, and have them release you from prison, because that could put them in a potential of getting fired or maybe even being in prison themselves. So why would a guard risk all that for a friendly acquaintance? So remember that this spell does not make people do things against their will. You can't charm a king to give you a bunch of gold. That also is not going to happen. So if you're already good at social skills, you have very few reasons to actually take this spell. So why am I saying this? It's because in our own lives, we ourselves have done things for complete strangers that we normally wouldn't do for even a friendly acquaintance. If that stranger happens to be very charming or persuasive, we might go out of our way to do things for them. To me, in the game, this is represented by a persuasion roll that is successful versus casting Charm Person that just makes them a friendly acquaintance. So, a few examples in real life. Say you're a guy and you see an attractive girl at the bar. You might buy her a drink. You're buying a complete stranger. You're spending your hard-earned money to buy a complete stranger something that they can consume for no reason at all, just to get to know them, right? Now, let's say Geraldo in accounting. Would you just randomly go up to him and say, "Here, have a drink on me," during a workday? Probably not. Probably not. You might, maybe it's their birthday, whatever, but just randomly like that, I don't think so. So we are willing to do things for complete strangers. So that's why I think that something like being proficient in persuasion or something is still going to get you further with someone than even the charm spell. So what this means for me is that bards, sorcerers, and warlocks who already have naturally high charismas, you have to in order to have to be decent at your class, you're probably not going to ever need to take Charm Person because your charisma skills are already going to be pretty high without the need to use magic to enhance your relationship with someone. And then, of course, once the spell ends, you're risking the person getting aggressive with you. They don't necessarily always get aggressive with you, but depending on the situation or what you were doing with them, they might get aggressive with you when the spell ends. So to me, it's an unnecessary risk if you're already a character who has a naturally persuasive way of interacting with people. And if you still need a boost instead of Charm Person, there are far many other options that are probably going to be better and don't carry the risks that Charm Person does. For example, Guidance is a great option. Enhanceability, or maybe a party member can grant you advantage with the help action or by helping you persuade the person. Or maybe have someone use Calm Emotions if it's a situation where you're trying to diffuse or cool off a tense situation. So basically that means that it leaves Wizards and Druids as pretty much the only classes that I would even recommend Charm Person for, because those two character classes generally aren't going to focus on a good charisma. In fact, they're probably going to use charisma as one of their dump stats. So they will need all the help that they can get in order to succeed in certain social interactions that are pretty important. So Charm Person will allow them to cheat through those very important interactions. And social interaction is something that is a large part of a lot of campaigns. So it's not anything to kind of wave off as, oh, well, that's just all it's good for, forget about it. For Wizards and Druids, not only are you going to have an instant friendly connection with the person that you're trying to interact with if you cast Charm Person on them, but you're also going to get advantage on charisma checks against them. The advantage part is not something that I think is particularly good because your charisma is probably already going to have a negative modifier. So getting advantage, you'll still get that negative modifier adjusted to it. So the advantage on the roll is not going to boost your chances of success by a tremendous amount. It will boost your chance of success by a little bit, but not by a tremendous amount. So what I'm saying here is that the optimal function of this spell is for information gathering. You want to do as few rolls as possible because if you're casting this spell, it means your charisma is probably not very good already. So for a few examples of uses for this. A guard might not be willing to talk to you if they're guarding your cell and you're locked up and you're trying to talk to them about something, gather some information. They're going to ignore you more than likely. Now, if you Charm Person, you're a friendly acquaintance. They'll strike up a conversation with you, sure, right? Or a guard in front of a castle or something. Let's say you're trying to find out which direction the king went, right? So that guard might be standing completely facing one direction. Think of like in England, the guards in England, right? Completely ignoring you, not willing to talk to you. But if you cast Charm Person, now they're a friendly acquaintance, they might be like, oh yeah, the king went to the west, they're headed over to whatever. And just kind of casual conversation, give you information that you may not have been able to acquire otherwise. Shopkeeper, right? So a shopkeeper probably won't tell you that his poisons are being delivered on Tuesdays at dawn. But with Charm Person, he might, in casual conversation, let that information out to you without a second thought. So this is I think, some of the better uses for it. Another one would be like, say, an apprentice wizard or an ally of someone else. You might be able to cast Charm Person on them and gather information as to what it is about that other person that annoys this person. And then that's ammunition for you later to be able to exploit that kind of thing. You're not going to be able to have them turn on their boss or their friend just by casting Charm Person, but you will be able to gather information about their boss or their friend that you can use then to exploit the cracks within their relationship. So very, very advanced type of thought process with regards to this spell, because none of it is really mechanical per se. So that's what makes this spell kind of difficult to use. I hope that I'm kind of clear at what I'm getting at here. Charm Person opens up a person to converse with you as if you are their friendly acquaintance, especially people who otherwise wouldn't give you the time of day. But making them do things or aggressively interrogating them might require a charisma check or persuasion check of some sort, intimidation, and those kind of checks may not succeed, or your DM may say, well, you don't even get to roll. That's automatically going to fail. That person is not willing to do this for you, therefore don't even bother rolling. So in other words, don't expect to pull off like some amazing social ninjaism just because you cast Charm Person on somebody. Now, some other uses for the spell, let's say you're somewhere that you're not supposed to be. Let's say you broke into some kind of a storage facility and a guard is walking around and catches you, well, you can cast Charm Person on them, and now they're going to be like, hey, Bob, what the hell are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. That is something that, as a DM, is how I would play that. They know you, you're a friendly acquaintance, but you still shouldn't be there, so leave now. Which means they'll give you the opportunity to leave without a confrontation or without them telling their superiors or telling other guards that there's an intruder. But if you don't leave, now you're putting them in a position where their job might be at risk. So if the guard comes up to you and says, what are you doing here? You cast Charm Person on them. Oh, Bob, you know what? You shouldn't be here. Why don't you leave? And you refuse to leave and you say, no, why don't you let me stay? Now it's going to require a roll, right, for persuasion. But even then, as a DM, if that's going to put that guard in a strange position, then I wouldn't even allow for a persuasion roll. I would just say, you're putting me in a position that is making me uncomfortable. At this point, no, that's not going to happen. And they're going to still go ahead and go and get guards or whatever because something strange is happening here with you. So as you can see, some very limited situations, but in a game with a lot of social encounters, it could come in handy with some proper forethought. So my recommendation is don't cast the spell to try and pull off a persuasion check unless you have a really good charisma score or other ways to further boost your charisma bonus. Use the spell mostly to gather intel and get out of sticky situations. I don't recommend ever using the spell for combat. In combat, first of all, if it's during combat, the creature is going to get advantage on their saving throw, which is extremely unlikely that you're going to land the spell anyways. Before combat, and even if you do, the creature is not going to attack you, but it's still going to attack your friends. Now, before combat, it certainly can help diffuse a situation and completely avoid the combat if you word it properly. But if you cast Charm Person on the creature, it's still going to be aggressive to the other people. If the fight hasn't started, you may be able to talk your way out of the situation because that creature might be willing to listen to you and understand that those people are your friends. But you still have to roleplay that. It's not an automatic thing. So I think the main saving grace for the spell is the long duration without needing to concentrate on the spell, and also it doesn't grant a saving throw once the creature fails. So most spells that are kind of like this require a saving throw at the end of the creature's turn every turn so they can get out of this charm or whatever. In the case of Charm Person, once they fail that initial saving throw, they don't get any more saving throws against it unless they take damage from you. So that's pretty good, and it makes it a little bit more useful in certain circumstances. And the 1 hour duration is pretty good, so that's not bad at all. So as you can see, very, very limited uses. I think it's a spell that most people should skip, including druids and wizards, unless you are in a campaign where you very specifically are going to have a lot of social encounters. In that case, you may want to pick it up if you're a druid or a wizard, and that's pretty much about it. So let's go ahead and look at the pros and cons here. So have you used Charm Person to good effect? I'd love to hear any interesting stories where you might have used Charm Person to either get out of a sticky situation or do something pretty cool. Let me know in the comments below. And that does it for our video on Charm Person. If you have any questions, please be sure to leave them down there in the comments down below. As always, I'm your innkeeper from the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.
I hope you enjoy our sauna. It's to die for.
It's so amazing here.
Well, I'm now cooking something completely unrelated to the massage that I was giving somebody earlier. Don't mind those noises. Go back to your room and get some rest. The next tale, it's gonna be a good one. Unless, of course, you want to partake in dinner tonight. I'm making my special Philip Mignon. Well, until next time, have a good night.